Okay, so good morning. We will today discuss the interface advection technique. So, if you recall, in the previous lectures, we discussed that how to mathematically define the interface. Once we mathematically define the interface, after that, what we need to do, as I told you earlier as well, that particular interface will be evolving with space and time. Okay, so once the interface is evolving with space and time, we have to, depending upon the normal interfacial velocity, so we have to devise certain numerical schemes which can help us in advection of the interface. Okay, so typically on a numerical grid. So earlier, whatever the representation of interface we have seen, that we have seen with some mathematical function, and these were mathematical function in general. Now we will try to present all these mathematical function in such a way so that we can include this interface description into our numerical solvers. Okay, so one of the method we studied, that was height function, and in case of height function, what we were having, hi of x will be equal to 1 if x is pointing in fluid I, and this will be equal to 0 if x is not in fluid I. Okay, now based on this data, this height function is nothing but identical to the phase density function. This height function is identical to phase density function which we have seen in case of experimental techniques. Is this point clear? So if the phase density function or the corresponding height function is known to me, and if I consider that I have a two-dimensional cell having sizes delta x and delta y in x and y directions, and of course in the normal direction it will be unity. Okay, so if I define a parameter ci comma j, where I comma j refers to the particular index of the control volume which we are considering. Okay, and then if I write 1 by delta x into delta y, what will be this? For a two-dimensional cell, this will be nothing but the volume of the cell. Okay, and then if I take volumetric integral of height function h of xy dxy, what it will be? This entire quantity will comes out to be nothing but volume of ith fluid in cell. Is this point clear? This will be coming out as nothing but the volume of ith fluid in the cell. So this function Cij is another type of interface representation function which is typically called as color function. Okay, so this function is typically called as color function, and you can see the mathematical description of this function is giving the ratio of volume of ith fluid in the cell divided by total volume of the cell. So ultimately I can also call this as nothing but my volume fraction of ith fluid. Is this one clear? So this can also be called as volume fraction of the ith fluid. One important point you have to understand, that the cell which is completely filled with the ith fluid, for that cell the value of Cij will be equal to 1. Okay, is this one clear? And value of Cij will be equal to 0 for a cell which is not having ith fluid at all. Okay, and the cell which is partly containing the ith fluid and partly containing the other fluid, their value of Cij can vary from 0 to 1. All are clear with this point? So color function, or I can say it's a volume fraction function, it typically is equal to 1 if cell is fully filled with the primary fluid or ith fluid which we are considering, and it is equal to 0 if cell is not filled with that fluid, and it will be 0 to 1 for the cell which contains partly the ith fluid and partly the other fluid. Okay, now we also know that whenever we have defined or represented our say interface with the help of these different mathematical functions. But ultimately, in a numerical solver, what we need to do, we need to propagate that interface, or we need to advect that interface with space and time depending upon the normal interface velocity. Okay. So for propagation of the interface, what I am having this equation which represents the total rate of change of height function with time. Okay, and this is equal to the temporal variation plus the advection term. Okay, ultimately, if you recall earlier, I told you that all these quantities, whether height function, color function, indicator function, whatever I am considering, all these are nothing but the only mathematical function which are just defined to take the advantage of mathematics for establishing the physical interface into our equations. Okay, so that's why these are not any property which will be actually diffusing with time. So ultimately, the mathematically what should happen, depending upon the interface velocity, the way in which direction interface is moving, these quantities, these height function values should actually advect. Is this one clear? So that's why the equation similarly simply can be written in terms of temporal term and the advection term. And ultimately, whatever the distribution of the fluids is there in the entire domain, that will be equal to 0. Now, you can see that if I use the height function for advection of the interface, then what will be happening? Then height function will be always giving me some sharp jump of property across the interface. Is this point clear? What will be happening? In this portion of the height function, density is say rho1, and whenever I am going to the other side of the interface, immediately density is becoming rho2. And if I have say water and air, then this side I am having density 1000 and this side I am having density 1. So density ratio is all of a sudden becoming 1000. Likewise, viscosity ratio for this combination all of a sudden may become 100. Okay, so it means that if I use this sharp interface description using the height function and then I implement this into my numerical solver, because of the sudden jump in property at the interface, I will be having some numerical errors. Okay, so numerically, what we need to do whenever we are solving the equations numerically, we need to allow the smooth transition of property from one phase to another phase near the interface. Okay, so for that purpose, what I define another function ixy, which is called as indicator function. What I am calling ixy I am calling as indicator function. And indicator function is nothing but integral of g of x minus x dash comma y minus y dash into h of x dash y dash dx dash dy dash. What is h? This is my height function, and g of x minus x dash into y minus y dash is something which is known as smoothing function. Okay, so this is given in a generic way at present. Specific mathematical form of the function is not defined. But what is the meaning of smoothing function? Smoothing function will help in change in value of height function in a gradual manner across the interface. And ultimately, I can use height function for defining the interface, because whenever we are dealing with the immiscible fluids at macroscopic level, the interface will be appearing to us a surface of infinitely small thickness. Okay, so by definition for macroscopic flow, interface is a sharp system. But if I involve that sharp definition of interface for exchange of property across the interface, then numerical solver will give errors because of sudden change in property. So that's why property across the interface like density, viscosity, etc. has to be transferred in the neighboring cells in a smooth manner. Okay, so what I am doing, I am along with the height function, I am using some smoothing function which will be helping us in defining the smooth variation of a particular function known as indicator function, and I can estimate the properties using the indicator function. Yes.
What if we use x as a very small number after, like, as we're moving from one phase to another, so that that we are getting a smooth function only without using the smoothing function?
No, we are not using getting smooth, because what does height function is representing? Say this point will be clear to you. Let me explain with the help of the figure. Okay, up to this point is it clear? Now, after this mathematical definition, let us consider this is my one dimensional grid. Okay, this is one dimensional grid. So this is some control volume which is J. Control volume in forward direction is J plus 1 and control volume in backward direction is J minus 1. All are clear with this point? Now you can see, by definition, height function is wherever I am having fluid 1, it will be equal to 1, and wherever fluid 2, that there will be 0. So let us consider up to this point I am having actually this grid is filled with fluid 1 and there I am having fluid 2. Now you can see the height function is up to this point it is 1 and suddenly it is falling, and after this point it is becoming equal to 0. Is this point clear? This is the definition of the height function. Now let's talk about color function. What is color function? The cells which are fully filled with fluid 1, there its value will be 1. So you can see this gray shaded portion is equal to 1 for this cell, it is equal to 1 for this cell. However, this cell, if you see this particular cell, it was only partly filled with fluid 1 and remaining portion was filled with which type of fluid? Fluid 2. So ultimately you can see that the value of Cj for this cell is somewhere in between 0 to 1. Is this one clear? And after this, everywhere this value is equal to 0. All are clear with this point? Now, what I have done, I have defined third function, indicator function, which is multiplied with some smoothing function. Okay, so once I multiplied it with smoothing function, what it will does, it will try to bring the gradual change of height function across the interface. So now you can see that once indicator function is multiplied with height function, after that whatever the final function I of x I have got, this is equal to 0 in bulk of fluid 2 and it is equal to 1 in bulk of fluid 1, and the cells which are close to the interface, there it is gradually transferring from fluid 1 to fluid 2. Is this point clear? Now whatever you were asking, is it clear? Okay, all are clear with this idea. So what is happening? H is sharp change, C is changing in this particular stepped fashion, C is still gradual but it is not a smooth gradual. C is again having a discontinuity. Okay, C is again having discontinuity, but indicator function which is multiplied with smoothing function is having purely gradual change from 0 to 1. And remember one point, height function is again associated with fluid 1, color function is again associated with amount of fluid 1 present in a cell, but indicator function is something which is beyond both these parameters. It is not having direct association with the fluid. It is only showing gradual variation in not only in a single cell which is containing the mixture of the two fluids, like which is containing the interface, but in the cell which are in neighborhood of the cell containing interface. Is this point clear? So it means that if I use height function in my numerical scheme, then up to this point I have to use rho 1 and immediately after this I will be going to rho 2. Similarly, if I use color function, then up to this portion I have to use rho 1 and in this remaining portion I have to use rho 2. But if I use indicator function, then if indicator function is 1 in this, here if density is 1000, Here indicator function is slightly less. So here if density is coming 800, then here if density is coming say close to 200, there it may come 100 or say 50, and finally then it will become equal to 1. Okay, so whenever I am moving from one fluid property to the other fluid property, in between the cells containing interface and the adjacent neighboring cells, there will be smooth transition of property from one phase to other phase. So this smooth transition of property actually, if linked with the indicator function, it will be improving the numerical stability. However, I cannot use indicator function for defining the interface, because if I use indicator function for defining the interface, then will my interface will be in this cell or in this cell? That will be becoming a problem. Okay, so interface will be diffusing into multiple cells. So if interface is diffusing into multiple cells, then interface will be having some finite amount of thickness, which is actually violating our physical scenario of sharp interface concept. Is this point clear? So it means that among all these functions, I can use height function and color function for defining the interface, but for specifying the variation of property, I have to use some function like indicator function. All are clear with this point? Now, if you see, one more function f of x I have plotted over here. What is f of x? I have earlier also told you in the previous lecture. This is nothing but level set function. All are clear with this point? F of x is nothing but our level set function. Okay. So, what was the definition of level set function? The point where interface lies, there its value is 0. In fluid 1, its value is positive, and it keep on increasing as the distance away from the interface in normal direction increases. So here you can see this is linearly increasing in fluid 1, and in the other side it is linearly decreasing and going below 0. All are clear with this point? So you can see that level set function is also a good indicator, because it is gradually varying in both the direction. So it can also be utilized in order to allow the smooth variation of properties across the interface. Is this point clear? Anyone is having any doubt? Because after this we will be now talking about the numerical advection of the interface using this type of functions. So all are clear up to this point? Now let us discuss the advection of the interface. So first I am discussing advection of the interface with the help of which function? Color function. Okay. So color function all of you know. So this is the representation of color function. This shaded portion is actually representing the color function. And color function, other name of color function I have given you. It is nothing but what? Volume fraction of ith fluid or primary phase. Okay. So if I have to see the advection of color function, equation will be del C by del T plus U times del C by del X equal to 0. This is only when I am considering the one dimensional advection of the color function. Is this one clear? This is only when I am considering one dimensional advection of the color function. What do you mean by one dimensional advection? I have already explained in scalar transport equation, but let me repeat it again. Say I have a wall, I have a pipe, and in this pipe section, if I say that up to this point it is filled with fluid 1 and in the surroundings it is fluid 2. Okay, so say I am saying water is filled and having straight interface, and in the remaining portion I am having air. Now, if with time water is moving in forward direction with some velocity u naught, so what will be happening? This interface after some time will be here. After some time it will be here. So likewise it will be displacing the air and it will be moving in the forward direction. Okay. So this is nothing but one dimensional advection of the interface. All are clear with this idea? Now, one important point, when we are studying this one dimensional advection, we are assuming that the velocity of water is u naught, which is constant, and at the same point of time this velocity is already known to us. Okay, so these are the two assumptions which we are making over here. So typically whenever water flows in a pipe, because of the viscous effects it cannot flow in this straight manner. Okay, so it will be having some parabolic type of velocity profile, but at the moment what we are doing, we are taking the assumption of one dimensional flow. Okay, so in this assumption of one dimensional flow we are assuming that at each and every cross section the velocity of water is same and its velocity is u naught, which is constant, it is not changing along the x direction. And at the same point of time we know that if we have to determine velocity field using the numerical solvers, then we have to solve continuity and momentum equations simultaneously. We are assuming for the time being, because here our major interest is to study the advection scheme for the interface. So that's why we will be assuming that velocity is already known to us, like we have done in case of scalar transport equation. However, in actual scenario, whenever you will be solving this particular equation, along with this equation simultaneously you have to also solve continuity and momentum equation in order to determine the value of u. All are clear with this point? Okay. So if I assume that my u is constant and it is equal to u naught, then easily I can put this u naught value inside the derivative term. Is this one clear? So if I put it inside the derivative term, my u naught will be going here. Now the product of c and u naught I am calling as f. So that's why the advection equation of color function is written as del c by del t plus del f by del x is equal to 0, where f is equal to u naught into c. All are clear with this point? Now what I need to do? I need to do the numerical integration of this particular equation. Okay. So once I will be doing the numerical integration of this particular equation, I will be finding that del c by del t can be simply written in terms of, if I am talking about jth cell, then Cj at time level n plus 1 minus Cj at time level n divided by delta t. Is this point clear? And ultimately in the right hand side I will be having del f by del x. So del f by del x, after I will be taking its volumetric integral and then representing that volumetric integral into the form of surface integral, what I will be finding? I will be simply finding, after the numerical treatment of this, f at face j plus 1 by 2 minus value of f at face j minus 1 by 2. Now I am not giving its detailed integration, because if you recall, when I have shown you the FVM discretization of what? Scalar transport equation, there we were having one, in advection term we were having rho u into phi. Okay, and when we performed the numerical integration of that term, we found rho u phi at point j plus 1 by 2 minus rho u phi at point j minus 1 by 2. All are clear with this idea? So that is coming from that particular lecture. Detailed steps I am not showing over here. Is this one clear? So now what I can do, I can say that from these two terms, I can say that Cj at n plus 1 will be equal to Cj at n, okay, minus of 1 by delta x into time integral from t to t plus delta t f at j plus 1 by 2 minus f at j minus 1 by 2 into dt. All are clear with this point? So this is simply coming from the once we are performing its uh, numerical integration. All are clear with this point? Anyone is having any doubt? Okay. So now again, if I choose the explicit scheme, then I can say that, so if I have to solve this time integration equation, you can see Cj value at time level n. So of course Cj value at time level n will be already known to me. Okay. So what is unknown? The unknown is f quantity. Now f quantity also, what I have to do, I have to decide whether f I will be calculating at time level n or time level n plus 1. So if I consider that this f I am calculating at time level n, then this can be represented in terms of the color function. It will be becoming nothing but a known parameter from the previous time level data, and ultimately I can easily solve this numerical integration. Is this point clear? Now I am assuming over here that f I will be taking from the previous time level n only, so I will be performing over here explicit approach for time integration. All are clear with this point? Now what is f? F is nothing but u naught into c. U naught is constant. Already I have taken this assumption. So whether you calculate at this phase or this phase, everywhere the value of u naught will be remaining same. But what I need to define? I need to define the value of c at phase j plus 1 by 2 and value of c at phase j minus 1 by 2. All are clear with this point? Now, what is this term? The term involving f is nothing but an advection term. Okay. So, typically, whenever we solve the advection term, which type of scheme we follow? Central difference scheme or upwind differencing schemes? For convective term, because we have to take into account the effect of flow direction, the transportive behavior of numerical scheme should be satisfied. So that's why we will be choosing which type of scheme? We will be choosing upwind scheme. Okay. Once in upwind scheme, if I use piecewise constant approximation, what happens? In upwind also, either I can use the piecewise constant approximation, or I can use linear approximation, or I can use quadratic approximation. I have different type of possibilities. Okay. So in upwind, the most simplistic, okay, in the upwind scenario, the most simplistic and the least order of accuracy scheme is nothing but my piecewise constant scheme. What we do in case of piecewise constant scheme, if you recall, if I have to calculate at value at the phase j plus 1 by 2, then I will be simply considering the value from the cell which is in the upstream direction. Is this point clear? So if I have to define the value at Cj plus 1 by 2, then I will be simply considering value of Cj. And when I have to consider at j minus 1 by 2, then I will be considering from the previous cell, which will be equal to Cj minus 1. All are clear with this point? So that is what you can see over here in this equation. Once I substituted that f is equal to c into u and u is constant, then u naught has come outside. U naught has come outside. Now this f function has become independent of the time once I have estimated it at the previous time level, because its value was known to us. So once it has become independent of the time, it can come out of the integration, and integration of dt from t to t plus delta t will be giving me 1 delta t over here. Is this one clear? So u naught into delta t divided by delta x which was already there. And in the inside, which would have been c at j plus 1 by 2 minus c at j minus 1 by 2. Cj plus 1 by 2 is written equal to cj, and j minus 1 by 2 is written equal to cj minus 1, using the piecewise constant approximation whenever we are considering the upwind preference. All are clear with this point? So this is my equation. Now, one important point you need to keep in mind: whenever we solve the interface advection schemes, you know that whenever we numerically solve the equation, I have already told you in this during the solution of scalar transport equation as well, that explicit equation become explicit scheme become unstable at large value of delta t. So delta t we have to limit by a certain condition in order to have stable solution from a explicit scheme. Is this point clear? In the similar way, whenever we numerically solve the advection of interface, then we have to keep one point into mind, that when this interface will be jumping from one cell to other cell because of the advection, our delta to t should be sufficiently small so that the jump of the interface should not simultaneously take place through multiple cells in a single time step. Is this point clear what I am saying? We have to limit our time step in such a way so that when this height function is crossing across the cells due to its advection, it should at max transfer the distance equal to delta x, which is distance of one cell size. If it is moving multiple cell size distance in a single time step, then the chances of occurrence of numerical errors in interface advection are more. So that's why what we need to do, we need to limit the time step. So that's why you can see, if u naught is velocity and delta t is time step, how much linear distance it can move? U naught into delta t. That u naught into delta t we are making less than equal to delta x, so that because of the normal interface velocity in a single time step, it should not take a jump of more than one cell size. All are clear with this point? So at the moment, u naught velocity is known to us. In the scenarios where u naught is not known to us and simultaneously we are solving the Navier-Stokes equations also, there one time step is limited by the CFL condition of the momentum equation, other time step is limited by the CFL condition of the volume fraction equation. Okay, and the combination of the volume fraction time step and the momentum time step, whichever is smallest, that one we use for the numerical scheme. Is this one clear? Now, if I know the value of delta t, that I have to keep less than this criteria, so then I can actually obtain this particular equation. Is this one clear? Now, once this equation is known to me, I can easily apply this equation for any unknown situation having one-dimensional scenario to predict the value of interface in the subsequent time steps. Is this one clear? So let's do this. Now I will take a physical problem. This is a one-dimensional pipe, and in this one-dimensional pipe I am having a slug of fluid 1. Okay, and it is having some constant velocity u naught, with which it is moving in which direction? Forward direction. Okay, so what will be happening after some time? If here is fluid 2, here is fluid 2, and it is moving with constant velocity u naught in forward direction, after some time you will be observing this, its position will be somewhere in the forward direction. Is this point clear? Now, what I need to do, so theoretically it is very simple because already I have made so many approximations. So in the physical system it is very easy for me if I know u naught, and if someone tells me that after say 5 seconds or 10 seconds this will be at what location, I can simply do u naught into delta t and I can tell its new position. Okay, and because its velocity is constant, so it will not be deforming in this direction. Its shape will be remaining as it is. Shape and size will be remaining as it is this one clear? Physically, is this one clear? So it means physically, if you plot its location as function of length of the pipe, so say this is my length of pipe, so at some time t equal to 0, say this slug, the height function of this slug or the color function of this slug was represented by something like this. Okay. Now physically what should happen? After some time, say t equal to 140 into delta t, this will be the new position of the slug, and after some time t equal to 280 into delta t, this is a new position of the slug corresponding to which I am having this representation. All are clear with this point? Now what I need to do, I cannot this is a very simple situation, so that's why I can easily find this, but ultimately if I have to solve this situation numerically, what I need to do, I need to discretize the numerical equation and then I have to take the help of computers to solve this. So for this type of problem, just now I have obtained one discretized equation which is Cj at n plus 1 is equal to Cj at n minus u naught delta t by delta x into Cj minus Cj minus 1. This is my equation. Okay. Now, if I have to apply this equation, first I have to form the grid structure. Okay. So, while forming the grid structure, say along the length of the pipe, I have taken likewise 1, 2, 3, 4, so on up to close to 200 grid points. Okay, and this grid size I have selected in such a way so that at the initial level there are around 20 grids which are defining this particular slug. All are clear with this point? So it means this slug is distributed among 20 cells initially. All are clear with this point? So it means that your grid structure is very fine. Whatever the size of slug is there, that slug is containing 20 cells within it. So the structure of the size of your grid is very fine. It is not distributed over 1 or 2 grid cell, but it is having 20 grid cell within this. All are clear to this point? Now, if I am having cells like this, what I can do? I can keep on solving this equation for different time levels by using, and delta t over here is considered equal to 0.5 into delta x. So it means that in a single time step, whenever interface will be moving from one cell to another cell, it can only jump half of the cell. So this condition is also restricted with good amount of accuracy. So if I have this value of delta t, then can I solve this equation? What will be my initial condition? Initial condition will be everywhere I will be having 0, 0. The 20 cells which contain the slug, these will be having value 1, 1, 1, and then again the value will be 0, 0, 0 everywhere. Is this point clear? Now, for each and every node point, I need to solve this equation, and this is an explicit equation. At t equal to 0, I know the value of c for all the node points. So, by using this equation, can I determine the value of c for all other points? Can you do this? If you do this, what you will be finding then? At t equal to 0, of course, because we are not numerically solving, whatever physical scenario is given, we are specifying that only. So, numerical grid and physical solution both will be coinciding. Okay. But whenever we are marching the solution with time, and if we see at t equal to 140 delta t, what you are observing? Physically, this would have been the expected result, but numerically, this blue colored line is something which will be the distribution of the color function. Okay, and whenever you have moved through 280 time steps, then you can see the peak value of color function has further decreased, and the this origin of distribution of the color function in the length direction has actually thickened. Is this point clear? So it means that this is a very simple problem. For this type of simple problem, whenever I am using the upwind differencing scheme for advection of the color function, when this solution is marching with time, the color function is actually spreading in multiple cells. Okay, so what is this? This is actually, all these are nothing but numerical artifacts. Okay, it should not have happened. This is a very simple problem. This should not have happened. So numerically, whenever you are solving this equation, what you are getting? You are getting that it is spreading in multiple cells. What could be the issue for this? Can you anticipate? First thing is, this is a very simple equation. What you can do for this physical scenario, you can write a small, this will be only using a single loop. So you can write a single for loop, while loop or any other loop, and then you can solve this, and then you can try plotting this whether you are getting this type of solution or not. Okay, so please give a try to this. This is very simple problem, so you can give a try by with the help of MATLAB code or any Python code or C programming code, whatever you want to do. Okay. So that point is there, you can reproduce this, but my question is, can you anticipate what could be the reason for distribution of this color function in multiple cells whenever we are marching? Why it is giving the unphysical variation? What issue is there in our numerical scheme? Can you anticipate? Please tell me. Are you able to think something? What could be the reason for this type of spread? Sorry? No, but for explicit, if we are maintaining these stability conditions, then it should not give unstable solution. And this solution is not unstable. If solution is oscillatory, then it is unstable. It is actually diffusing. It's a stable solution. But the point is, it is diffusing more in the axial direction. What could be the reason? See this figure, and can you anticipate something from this particular figure?
As it goes on, the variation for getting smoother.
Actually, you have to see this point here. I have shown multiple function, but advection for which function I am writing? Only for Cj. So just try to answer this from the variation of Cj. Think about this figure. While we took estimation of fluxes, what has happened? Are you able to understand, or shall I explain? You consider each cell as nothing but one container. Each cell you are considering as nothing but a container. Now what will be happening? if I say my this container was fully filled at initial time and this container was partly filled, when solution is advecting because of the velocity, first what should happen? If some more water is pumped into this, then whatever the spilled over water is there, that should first fill the next container, and after that it should spill to the next cell. Is this point clear? So it means that if my proper physical effect is accounted for into the numerical scheme, then upon advection, first whatever the remaining portion is there in this cell, first this entire portion should get filled, and after that the fluid should transfer to the next cell. But what is happening now? Now whatever scheme you used, you consider that the flux at this point is equal to Cj, and the flux at this point is equal to, flux at this point is equal to Cj minus 1, and flux at this point is equal to Cj. What is the meaning of this? The meaning of this is, if this is your cell J minus 1, this is J and this is J plus 1, then ultimately in time delta t, if this interface is moving this much, then in one time step what has happened? In J cell, interface has reached like this, and in J plus 1 it has gone up to this. Is this point clear? Are you getting my point? What has happened? Because what I have done, at this point I assumed that the flux which has moved, that was equal to Cj. So what was Cj? Cj was fully filled. So that fully filled has just displaced through U naught into delta T. And here I assumed that it is filled up to this. So this much portion has displaced through U naught into delta T. Now if you calculate the volume fraction, this cell is also having some value of volume fraction from 0 to 1, and this cell is also having some value of volume fraction 0 to 1. So physically what will be happening? Physically at a time only one container will be having value what? 0 to 1. Okay, if I assume this to be a container system, then physically at a time only one container will be half filled. But here simultaneously in the two consecutive cells, actually what would have happened? First this J cell would have filled entirely, and after that volume had transferred to the next cell. But the numerical approximation which we are considering over here, what it is doing, it is partially filling this and partially filling the next one. That too it is doing only in a single time step. Whenever I will be running this for multiple time steps, then ultimately this will be spreading over the larger number of cells. Okay, so in this way what will be happening? In this way my solution, whatever the cell which are containing partial value of volume fraction, the number of these cells will be actually increasing. If number of these cells are increasing, my interface shape will be actually distorting. Because ultimately for defining the proper interface, the minimum number of cells should have the what? Volume fraction in between 0 to 1. Okay. In this way, in larger portion of the domain, the partial value of color function will be actually spreading. Ultimately, initially interface will keep on becoming thick, and after some time steps, it will be becoming so wide that almost it will be spreading over the entire domain, and ultimately the true representation of the interface will be lost. All are clear with this point? And so it means that for very simple scenario, if I am using the upwind scheme which works perfectly fine for single phase flow situation, if I use that scheme, that is giving me significant amount of error. And the reason is very simple. Whenever you apply upwind scheme for single phase flow, then this cell is also filled with same type of fluid, other is also filled with same type of fluid. Only the momentum of the same fluid is transferring across the cell boundaries. But in this way, along with the momentum, we have to also tell that how much portion of fluid 1 is moving, how much portion of fluid 2 is moving across the boundary. So this is why you can see that the use of normal upwinding scheme, even for the simplistic approach which is involving so many assumptions and only the one dimensional advection, there also it is resulting in significant amount of numerical artifacts. All are clear with this point?
Sir, what about if you use water activity?
That is what I will be discussing in the next lecture. So next lecture is about advection of color function with the help of first linear scheme. Then we will be seeing that linear is having some other issues. Okay, so I will discuss this in the next class then.